defendant shall serve a term of 2 years on that count as well.
Defendant Weldon K. McDavid, guilty of the crime of conspiracy to commit murder.
Specifications: count 3, aggravated robbery with specifications. Count 4, aggravated murder.
In a South Carolina courtroom, Shenita Latrice Cunningham and Erica Mae Butts received a grim verdict. They were sentenced to death for the murder of a young child. But as the judge pronounced their fate, the defendants' reactions were shocking. They collapsed in court, unable to bear the weight of their guilt. What drives criminals like these women and others convicted of similarly heinous crimes? And will their punishment be commensurate with the severity of their offenses? Join us to unveil what led to these surprising moments of vulnerability and distress seen in killers collapsing in court. Gerit Singh. In confines of Westchester Township, Ohio, on April 28, 2019, tragedy struck as Gerit Singh allegedly claimed the lives of 4 family members in their apartment. Among those lost were his wife, Jalil, along with his in-laws Hakikat Singh and Parmjit Kaur, and his aunt-in-law Amarjit Kaur. The night of the incident, Gerit made a distressing call to 911, expressing shock and confusion. He questioned the dispatcher about the gunshot wounds and hesitantly responded that he didn't know their condition. When the police arrived, they discovered him in a hysterical state, with blood covering him. During questioning, Gerit initially claimed he had found the victims lying on the floor upon returning home, describing how he discovered them with the apartment door already open. Despite appearing distraught, he became uncooperative when asked for a swab of his hands to check for gunpowder residue. Months later, Gerit was apprehended outside a Walmart in Connecticut and charged with 4 counts of aggravated murder. His arrest followed a dramatic moment during a bond hearing where he collapsed after the judge indicated a denial of bond. This incident added to the courtroom drama, highlighting the gravity of the charges against him. At his trial, prosecutors argued the murders were premeditated, pointing to evidence such as a gun with its serial number tampered with, found dumped in a nearby lake. They also suggested an extramarital affair as a possible motive, despite Gerit's conflicting statements and lack of a clear explanation. Despite the prosecution's case, the jury failed to reach a unanimous decision, resulting in a mistrial. This outcome was unexpected and underscored the complexity of the case. A retrial was scheduled to commence at a later date. If convicted, Gerit faces the possibility of the death penalty, highlighting the severity of the charges and the ongoing legal proceedings that have gripped the community and garnered significant attention. Shenita Cunningham and Erica Butts. In a heart-wrenching case, 3-year-old Serenity Richardson was murdered by her godmother, Erica, while in her care at home in Somerville. Erica, who was responsible for Serenity's well-being, confessed to repeatedly whipping the child with a belt for urinating on the floor. When Serenity lost consciousness, Erica and her accomplice, Shenita, tried to revive her using dangerous and inhumane methods, including bleach and an ice bath. The extent of Serenity's injuries was staggering, with over 250 wounds found on her small body, including a lacerated liver, broken ribs, and a fractured skull. The prosecution emphasized that the only parts of Serenity's body that remained uninjured were the soles of her feet. Judge Richardson was deeply affected by the case, stating that the photos of Serenity's battered body were the most disturbing thing she had ever seen. She sentenced both Erica and Shenita to life in prison without parole, acknowledging the severity of their crimes and their disregard for Serenity's suffering. The verdict was met with chaos in the courtroom, as both defendants collapsed and had to be restrained and removed. The family members of the defendants were heard screaming, "I love you," as they were taken away. This tragic case bears some resemblance to the shocking case of Diana Lovejoy, a YouTuber who conspired to murder her ex-husband in California. Diana Lovejoy. In a courtroom drama that gripped California, Diana G. Lovejoy was pronounced guilty of conspiracy to commit murder. It all began in 2016 amidst a turbulent divorce and custody battle with her ex-husband, Greg Mulvihill. According to reports, Diana had conspired with firearms instructor Weldon McDavid Jr. to carry out a sinister plot to murder her husband, Greg. McDavid allegedly lured Greg to a secluded spot in Carlsbad under pretenses, claiming he had vital information for Greg's legal case against Diana. However, upon Greg's arrival, gunfire erupted, leaving him critically wounded. His frantic friend immediately dialed 911, describing the shocking scene of an unseen sniper. Paramedics rushed Greg to a nearby hospital where he luckily survived despite sustaining serious injuries. Police investigations later uncovered damning evidence linking Dianato to the crime. A burner phone, purchased by Diana just weeks before the incident, was traced back to McDavid's lure call. Additionally, it was alleged that Diana had paid McDavid $2,000 for his role as the assassin. At trial, Greg recounted the terrifying moments leading up to the shooting, describing the chilling realization of being in the sniper's crosshairs. The jury deliberated and ultimately found Diana guilty on all counts, including conspiracy to commit murder. In a dramatic courtroom moment on August 14, 2018, Diana stumbled backward, her hands flailing wildly, as if searching for something to grasp. Her legs buckled, and she collapsed to the floor, her body crumpling in a heap. The sound of her head hitting the ground was audible throughout the courtroom. The courtroom erupted in gasps and murmurs, prompting her family members to swiftly gather around her, their faces filled with shock and disbelief. Diana lay motionless, her eyes closed, as paramedics rushed in to attend to her. They checked her vital signs, administered oxygen, and tried to revive her. After several minutes, she was finally helped to her feet, looking dazed and disoriented. The judge immediately called for a recess, and the courtroom was cleared. Months later, during her sentencing, Diana made a heartfelt plea to the judge, expressing lingering care and affection for Greg, despite their tumultuous history. In a final decision that marked the end of a tragic saga, Diana was sentenced to 26 years to life in prison. McDavid, for his part in the crime, received a sentence of 50 years to life. Reflecting on this astounding case, one can't help but wonder, how does Lovejoy's courtroom collapse and sentencing compare to the unexpected twists and turns that turn others into viral sensations, like the infamous case of Tony Farmer? Tony Farmer, a former top 100 ESPN recruit and once a promising NBA prospect, was entangled in a shocking legal saga in Ohio in April 2012. The incident that thrust him into infamy involved a brutal assault on his ex-girlfriend, Andrea Lane, captured in chilling detail by CCTV cameras. The footage depicted Farmer confronting Andrea as she exited her apartment complex in Bedford Heights. In a sudden burst of violence, he seized her bag and delivered a devastating blow that sent her sprawling to the ground. But the assault didn't stop there. Another camera captured Farmer relentlessly pursuing Andrea, unleashing a series of vicious kicks to her head as she tried to escape, leaving her in a corner, helpless and terrified. Farmer's actions were made even more serious by the charges against him, which included kidnapping, robbery, and assault. Despite Andrea's plea for leniency during sentencing, where she testified on Farmer's behalf and expressed hope for rehabilitation, Judge Pamela Barker remained resolute. She emphasized that Farmer's athletic achievements did not exempt him from accountability, especially in light of his lack of remorse and his violation of a court-mandated no-contact order by sending threatening messages to Andrea after the assault. The courtroom drama reached a climax during sentencing when Farmer, upon hearing his fate of a 3-year prison term, collapsed in shock and disbelief. This gripping moment was recorded and swiftly circulated online, embodying the sorrowful narrative of a talented young athlete's downfall following his violent actions. On the other hand, the case of Cason Wilkins, who also faced assault charges in Ohio and gained notoriety for faking a heart attack in court, underscored the varied approaches individuals take in dealing with the repercussions of their criminal actions. Cason Wilkins. Wilkins was on trial facing serious charges, including felony assault for an incident in Dayton where he allegedly attempted to murder a man. Wilkins chose to represent himself in court, but faced significant challenges from the start. He asked for more time to prepare his defense, but Judge Mary Catherine Huffman denied his request, citing the ample time he had already had. Wilkins had been disruptive throughout the proceedings, accusing the court of unfair treatment and even claiming he was being lynched. Despite repeated warnings from Judge Huffman about his conduct potentially forfeiting his right to represent himself, Wilkins persisted. The trial was already delayed for 3 days due to Wilkins' disruptions, when he suddenly collapsed in court, clutching his chest. The proceedings were halted as court medics attended to him, but upon examination, they found no medical concerns. Wilkins then feigned being unresponsive and slumped in his chair, attempting to delay further. A court deputy used smelling salts to revive Wilkins, who abruptly came back to consciousness. The trial resumed, but Wilkins remained uncooperative, refusing to engage with witnesses or respond to the judge's prompts. Eventually, Judge Huffman reminded him that his time to present his case was up, and proceeded without further delay. Despite his efforts to derail the trial, Wilkins was ultimately convicted on all charges and sentenced to 42 years in prison. This marked the end of Wilkins' legal battle, contrasting sharply with cases like that of Shelby Isaac, who famously called for her mother in court while facing double murder charges in Tennessee in 2016. Shelby Isaac. Shelby Isaac was accused of fatally shooting Eddie Tate and his girlfriend, Edwina Thomas, at a parking lot in Memphis. The alleged motive stemmed from a dispute over a $250 purchase of hair extensions from Tate, which Isaac was reportedly unhappy with. Seeking a refund, Isaac arranged a second meeting with Tate, leading to a heated argument where Isaac pulled out a gun and shot the couple. Tragically, Edwina Thomas was 8 weeks pregnant at the time. Police swiftly arrested Isaac and charged her with first-degree murder. During the trial, Isaac's getaway driver, Victoria, provided inconsistent testimonies, initially claiming she witnessed Isaac shooting the victims, but later faltering under scrutiny. The defense argued there was a lack of substantial physical evidence tying Isaac directly to the crime. Despite these challenges, the jury reached a unanimous decision, finding Isaac guilty of second-degree murder on all counts. As the verdict was read aloud in court, Isaac collapsed in her attorney's arms and then onto the floor in shock. However, Judge James Lambie continued with the proceedings stoically, unaffected by the emotional outburst. Isaac's cries for her mother and emotional breakdown did not sway the judge, who proceeded to sentence her to 30 years in prison. Shelby Isaac's case highlights the devastating outcomes that can result from a dispute spiraling out of control, standing in stark contrast to other instances of violent crime, like Jalil Smith Riley, who faces murder charges following a failed robbery attempt. Jalil Smith Riley. In Ohio in 2013, 23-year-old Smith Riley became the center of a tragic story when he reportedly shot and killed 22-year-old Portia Brooks and severely injured her boyfriend, Aaron Martin, during a botched robbery. The couple was sitting in their car on Carthage Avenue in Norwood when Smith Riley and two accomplices approached them with guns. Smith Riley demanded money from Aaron, who had none, and in a brutal act, shot him in the head, causing permanent brain damage. He then turned his gun on Portia, fatally shooting her. Despite the victim's desperate 911 call, the culprits fled the scene. Riley was apprehended and faced charges for both shootings. To avoid the death penalty, he initially pleaded guilty to aggravated murder and attempted murder. However, he later sought to withdraw his guilty plea, which complicated the legal proceedings. During sentencing, the victim's family members confronted Riley, expressing their deep emotional pain and loss caused by his actions. Portia's sister passionately advocated for denying Riley parole, insisting that he should face a life sentence without the possibility of release, just as her sister's life had been taken away. To everyone's surprise, Riley made a heartfelt plea for leniency in court, tearfully expressing regret for his crimes. His attorney passionately highlighted his client's genuine remorse and the irreversible consequences of his actions. Despite these emotional appeals, the judge stood unwavering, sentencing Riley to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The courtroom brimmed with intense emotion as Smith Riley collapsed upon receiving his sentence, closing a tragic chapter that devastated the lives of a young couple and their loved ones forever. Riley's story serves as an example of the severe and long-lasting effects of violent criminal behavior, highlighting the contrast between ordinary individuals and the often lenient treatment of high-profile figures like music executive Suge Knight, who has faced legal consequences for his actions in public. Subscriber's pick. In the quiet courtroom of a rural town surrounded by gentle hills, the trial of Jake Barger was approaching its culmination. Jake, a robust man in his early 40s, faced allegations of multiple armed robberies and suspected murder that had plagued the community for months. As the judge readied to deliver the verdict, a heavy tension filled the room, noticeable even amid the whispers of the assembled onlookers. The prosecution had presented a compelling case against Jake, backed by eyewitness testimonies and forensic evidence linking him to the crime scenes. His defense attorney, a seasoned litigator known for his impassioned arguments, had fought tooth and nail to cast doubt on the prosecution's case. But as the trial progressed, it became increasingly clear that the odds were stacked against Jake. On the fateful day of the verdict, the courtroom was packed with curious onlookers and concerned family members. Jake sat stoically at the defense table, his eyes flickering nervously between the judge and the jury. His attorney stood beside him, whispering words of reassurance as they awaited the jury's decision. The judge inquired if the jury had reached a verdict, and the foreperson responded solemnly, stating they had found the defendant, Jake Thompson, guilty on all counts. Gasps and murmurs erupted from the spectators, and Jake's family members rushed to his side, their faces etched with shock and disbelief. Jake himself remained seated, his hands clenched tightly into fists as he processed the verdict. His attorney placed a comforting hand on his shoulder, but Jake seemed lost in his thoughts, staring blankly ahead as if trying to comprehend the gravity of the moment. Suddenly, without warning, Jake slumped backward in his chair, his body trembling uncontrollably. The courtroom erupted into chaos as paramedics were summoned, and Jake was quickly surrounded by concerned onlookers. His attorney shouted for help, frantically trying to stabilize Jake as he struggled to breathe. Paramedics swiftly entered the courtroom, their rapid movements standing out against the stunned silence of the spectators. They quickly assessed Jake's condition, administering first aid as they worked to stabilize him. Concerned whispers rippled through the courtroom as Jake was carefully placed on a stretcher and wheeled out of the courtroom, leaving behind a palpable sense of unease. Outside the courthouse, news crews had gathered, their cameras trained on the scene unfolding before them. Reporters hastily scribbled notes as they captured the drama playing out in real time. Speculation ran rampant among the crowd, with theories ranging from a sudden heart attack to a stress-induced collapse. Hours later, Jake was rushed to a nearby hospital, where doctors worked tirelessly to determine the cause of his collapse. Rumors swirled through the community, fueling debates over Jake's guilt and innocence. Some believed his collapse was a desperate ploy for sympathy, while others sympathized with the toll the trial had taken on him. As the days passed, Jake slowly regained consciousness, his recovery marked by intense media scrutiny and public interest. His attorney issued a statement, confirming that Jake's collapse had been triggered by a severe panic attack brought on by the stress of the trial. After witnessing Jake being one of the killers sending back to Brian now collapsing in court, the lingering question is clear. How does the emotional strain of a trial affect those accused of serious crimes? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Suge Knight. In a series of tumultuous events spanning decades, Suge Knight, the notorious music mogul, faced a litany of legal challenges and personal confrontations that shaped his turbulent life. In January 2015, Knight was charged with murder in California after a fatal confrontation with his longtime adversary Clay Sloan outside a burger stand in Compton. CCTV footage captured Knight arriving in a red pickup truck and getting into a heated argument with Sloan. Shockingly, Knight backed up his truck, striking Sloan, and then in a harrowing turn, accidentally ran over Terry Carter, a respected businessman from Compton, who tragically died at the scene. Knight turned himself in, making a memorable entrance with sunglasses and a cigar in hand. However, his bravado quickly faded during his bond hearing when the defense argued against the exorbitant $25 million bond. Knight collapsed, illustrating the gravity of the situation. His attorney raised concerns about Knight's health, citing inadequate treatment for diabetes and blood clots while in jail. After years of legal battles, Knight eventually pleaded no contest to a charge of voluntary manslaughter in October 2018. During sentencing, Terry Carter's daughter delivered a powerful statement condemning Knight's actions as callous and devoid of moral character, lamenting the profound loss her family had suffered. As part of his plea deal, Knight was sentenced to 28 years in prison. Additionally, there's the case of Robert Gee in Michigan, who is facing murder charges following a fatal carjacking incident. Robert Gee's pursuit of a stolen car one fateful night outside a bar in Muskegon Heights tragically intersect with the decisive actions of 26-year-old Jacob Ramos. Witnessing his brother's car being stolen, Ramos reacted swiftly, discarding his jacket and mounting his motorcycle in pursuit. Unbeknownst to Ramos, Robert was also tailing the stolen vehicle in another car. Leaning out from his moving vehicle, Robert fired a fatal shot that struck Ramos in the back, causing him to crash his motorcycle in a nearby yard. A concerned homeowner dialed 911, reporting the scene where Ramos lay fatally injured. Ramos tragically died at the scene. Robert was swiftly apprehended and charged with murder, felony firearms possession, and unlawful use of a firearm. During the trial, an eyewitness who was in the car with Robert that night testified, detailing how Robert had fired the fatal shot. Prosecutors argued that Robert's actions were deliberate and aimed at causing harm, emphasizing how he had positioned himself out of the car window to take aim. Ultimately, Robert was convicted of first-degree murder. Tensions were high during his sentencing, culminating in a courtroom outburst when Robert appeared to experience medical distress. His family members were escorted out as Robert collapsed in his chair and had to be carried from the courtroom. Robert was subsequently sentenced to life in prison without parole for the murder of Jacob Ramos. Meanwhile, Deshaun Boylan, whose theft of the car set off the tragic chain of events, was also found guilty of first-degree murder and arson, resulting in a comparable life sentence with no possibility of parole. While Robert faces a lifetime behind bars for his role in Ramos's death, this case echoes the severity of other crimes, such as Ronald Lee Haskell's revenge-driven murder of an entire family, highlighting the devastating consequences of violent acts in our society. Ronald Lee Haskell. On July 9th, 2014, a horrific tragedy unfolded in the upscale neighborhood of Spring, Texas. Ronald Lee Haskell, dressed as a FedEx delivery driver, arrived at the Stay family home with sinister intentions. Haskell's ex-sister-in-law, 34-year-old Katie Stay, had been a source of resentment for him, and he blamed her for his divorce from her sister. In a startling twist, Haskell restrained 5 children and 2 adults in the house before brandishing a 9mm pistol and fatally shooting Katie and her husband, Stephen. After killing Katie and her husband, Stephen, Haskell proceeded to methodically murder 4-year-old Zach, 7-year-old Rebecca, 9-year-old Emily, and 13-year-old Brian. Amazingly, 15-year-old Cassidy Stay survived after being shot in the head by pretending to be dead. Cassidy managed to call the authorities, leading to a thrilling car chase through suburban Houston. Police chased Haskell through crowded streets before cornering him in a cul-de-sac. A standoff ensued, lasting over 3 hours before Haskell surrendered. Ronald Lee Haskell was taken into custody and charged with the most severe crime, capital murder. But in a dramatic turn of events, Haskell's arraignment took an unexpected turn. As the charges were read out, he suddenly collapsed, his body crumpling under the weight of his guilt. Despite this, the trial proceeded, and Haskell's niece, Cassidy Stay, showed remarkable courage in testifying against her uncle. She relived the horrific events of that fateful day, her voice steady as she described the terror she endured. She also showed the jury the scar on her skull, a constant reminder of the bullet that grazed her head. In a powerful statement, Cassidy addressed Haskell directly, her words a testament to her resilience. She declared her determination to move forward, to find happiness despite the trauma she suffered. And as she spoke, she left Haskell to face the consequences of his actions. This heartbreaking incident prompts inquiries into the psyche of serial killers such as Haskell and Anthony Kirkland, currently facing multiple murder charges in Ohio. Anthony Kirkland. In the summer of 2009, the peaceful woods near Cincinnati were rocked by a baffling mystery when 13-year-old Esme Kenny vanished without a trace. Police discovered Anthony Kirkland sleeping nearby and brought him in for questioning. Initially, Kirkland denied any involvement, but when authorities found Esme's watch and iPod in his possession, he confessed to encountering her. Kirkland claimed it was accidental, explaining that Esme reminded him of his wife, which provoked him into losing his temper. As the investigation unfolded, Kirkland revealed the horrifying fate of Esme and 3 other victims. He admitted to assaulting and killing Esme, Mary Newton in 2006, 14-year-old Sanoa Crawford in that same year, and 25-year-old Kimya Rollison. Kirkland burned all the victims' bodies to destroy evidence, a pattern he started in 1987 when he strangled and burned his girlfriend, Leola Douglas. Kirkland pleaded guilty to the murders of Mary Newton and Kimya Rollison, but went to trial for the killings of the 2 teenagers. At his trial, Kirkland expressed regret and offered apologies to the families of the victims, asserting that his actions were influenced by his mental health issues and traumatic history. During the arraignment for the murders of the teenagers, Kirkland suffered a collapse as the judge listed the aggravated murder charges against him. After being assisted up, the proceedings continued and Kirkland pleaded not guilty. The prosecution sought the death penalty, arguing that aggravating factors outweighed any mitigating circumstances. Kirkland's defense countered, citing his mental health issues and traumatic past as reasons for a life sentence. Despite his plea for mercy and acknowledgement of his own guilt, Kirkland was sentenced to death. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.